Hoping that we will govern not as two parties, but as one nation.
The president delivers his second State of the Union. What he had to say.
America's a nation of believers.
Plus what to expect during this year's National Prayer Breakfast. And why Christians in Syria worry about the threat of Turkey. All that and more tonight on Faith Nation.
President Trump's State of the Union highlighted everything from abortion to immigration. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
And I'm Jenna Browder. He no doubt drew a very clear line in the sand on those issues. This was President Trump's second State of the Union, but his first to a split Congress.
White House correspondent Ben Kennedy brings us a full recap in tonight's top story.
President Trump pushed back against abortion, saying we need to work together to build a culture that cherishes innocent life. A strong message he hit on during his speech, which was delayed a week due to the partial government shutdown.
We meet tonight at a moment of unlimited potential.
President Trump took advantage of the pulpit Tuesday night to call for unity and bipartisanship.
There is a new opportunity in American politics if only we have the courage together to seize it.
Trump also took advantage of recent headlines to fight for the unborn, calling on Congress to pass legislation to prohibit late-term abortions.
There could be no greater contrast to the beautiful image of a mother holding her infant child than the chilling displays our nation saw in recent days. Lawmakers in New York cheered with delight upon the passage of legislation that would allow a baby to be ripped from the mother's womb moments from birth. These are living, feeling, beautiful babies who will never get the chance to share their love and their dreams with the world. And then we had the case of the governor of Virginia, where he stated he would execute a baby after birth.
The commander-in-chief then broke down his vision for safe and legal immigration, demanding a border wall. He illustrated his point by hosting family members of an elderly couple murdered in their home just last month by an undocumented immigrant.
I will never forget, and I will fight for the memory of Gerald and Sharon, that it should never happen again. Not one more American life should be lost because our nation failed to control its very dangerous border.
Trump said, simply put, walls save lives.
In the past, most of the people in this room voted for a wall, but the proper wall never got built. I will get it built.
The future of the wall still remains in question as congressional negotiators continue to work on a deal to prevent another government shutdown. In the Democrats' response, former Georgia governor candidate Stacey Abrams placed blame for the recent closings of the government directly on the president.
The shutdown was a stunt engineered by the President of the United States, one that defied every tenet of fairness and abandoned not just our people, but our values.
Trump struck a bipartisan tone when talking about rebuilding America, fighting cancer, eradicating HIV, lowering the cost of health care, and the positive economy.
An economic miracle is taking place in the United States, and the only thing that can stop it are foolish wars, politics, or ridiculous partisan investigations.
He got a standing ovation from both sides after stating women have filled more than 50% of new jobs created in the last year.
We also have more women serving in Congress than at any time before.
Trump then reaffirmed determination to protect American interest and end foreign wars.
If I had not been elected President of the United States, we would right now, in my opinion, be in a major war with North Korea.
Now, President Trump confirmed his second summit with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un for February 27th and 28th in Vietnam. Trump said his relationship with Kim is good, but that much work remains to be done in North Korea. Ben Kennedy, CBN News, the White House.
Well, Hans von Spakovsky of the Heritage Foundation joins us now for more. Hans, great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Sure, thanks for having me.
Hans, what's your biggest takeaway from the President's State of the Union?
I thought it was a really, really good speech. And, you know, it was very long. I think it was the longest speech since Bill Clinton in 1990. But, you know, he had said that he wanted to really reach across the aisle to try to convince Democrats in Congress to cooperate with him instead of constantly fighting him. And, you know, he expressed that message throughout the entire speech.
Well, Hans, following the partial government shutdown and in the throes of yet another set of negotiations to avoid another shutdown in about less than 10 days, the president's push for the border wall still continues. Do you think the president changed any minds last night?
I don't know. You know, he's made several offers to compromise with the Democrats on other things that they have wanted, such as a possible road to amnesty and citizenship for DACA beneficiaries, and they've always rejected that because he has said, you know, a condition for that is funding the wall. So I don't know if he's changed any minds, although I have to tell you, I think his presentation last night on immigration was a common sense, principled approach to how to solve that problem.
Yeah, Hans, you know, heading into 2020, the president, he really defined a lot of issues, whether it was socialism, abortion, the wall, immigration, all of these issues. As we head into 2020, will that put Republicans and Democrats, you know, on the record? Will they have to take a stance? What did you make of that?
Yeah, I think that was actually a key thing last night. It's very clear, you know, Democrats went into that speech thinking they were going to be constantly, I'm sure, booing him and showing their displeasure with what he was saying. But he really put them on the spot on so many of those issues, including abortion, and talking about basically what's equivalent to infanticide. And they had a tough time, I think, showing any kind of displeasure, because to do that, I don't think the American people would have liked it.
Yeah, he had some pretty stark contrast there.
He did.
Last question for you, and we've only got about a minute left. You know, some people were debating whether or not Trump would take the opportunity to declare a national emergency during the State of the Union. He didn't, of course, mention that last night, but do you think that's still on the table? Do you think that's something that he might still explore if that funding isn't provided for the border wall?
Yeah, I suspect he didn't mention it last night because, you know, he's still negotiating. There's still some funding for the government for another week or so. But no, I think that's still on the table. He's been very adamant about getting funding for the wall. And I think if the Democrats don't agree to provide it, I think he is going to seriously look at declaring a national emergency and seeing if there are undesignated but appropriated funds in other places like the Department of Defense that he can use for this.
Hans von Spakovsky with the Heritage Foundation. Good to see you, sir. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Well, as Ben Kennedy reported at the top of Faith Nation, the president set aside time last night to address recent late-term abortion measures in New York and Virginia and to remind lawmakers what the Bible has to say about each life.
Let us work together to build a culture that cherishes innocent life. And let us reaffirm a fundamental truth. All children, born and unborn, are made in the holy image of God.
Most Republicans and even a few Democrats agreed with the president's pro-life push during his speech.
I'm pro-life. I think, you know, people know my record. I think I'm one of 4, 5, 6 Democrats and pro-life. I mean, I'll do whatever I can to make sure that we protect life. But I do know the makeup of the House. I do know you have to get to 60 votes over there. And so to get to where the president wants to get might be difficult at this time.
As he talked about the unborn, I was very appreciative of that moment too, to recognize that life is precious and that it should be protected, unlike what's going on in New York and Virginia. So those were all very inspiring moments.
And CBN News Chief Political Analyst David Brody is here now to help us break this down a bit more. David, the president referring to Scripture, really saying all children, born and unborn, are made in the image of God. Strong language. Have we ever seen anything quite like this from another president?
Well, that line specifically, sure. Ronald Reagan talked about the holy image of God. He talked about the unborn. The difference here, though, is Donald Trump really got into some specific language, everything from ripping the baby from the mother's womb and talking about executing babies after birth. So, I mean, we've never seen anything like that before, and I think that's the difference. And this is why he will go down as the most pro-life president we've ever seen in this country.
Talking about some of that language, David, the president received some backlash, some criticism for using such stark language like a baby being ripped from its mother's womb moments before birth. Is that criticism warranted?
No, it's not warranted at all, and here's why. Because technically what that New York law says is that indeed after 24 weeks there can be an abortion all the way up until the baby's actually coming out through the birth canal. And actually here's what the law says, and I've got it here. It says it can happen except for the absence of fetal viability. In other words, if there is some sort of fetal viability, in other words, if a doctor or even a physician, a licensed nurse practitioner says the baby can't survive outside the womb or is going to have a disability, it's basically the judgment of the doctor or licensed practitioner. If that's the case, then they can abort the baby all the way up until that 38th, 39th, and 40th week. So I think that's a big part of it. Also, very important, in that New York law, it doesn't say just the life of the mother that should be protected. It also talks about the health of the mother, and pro-life advocates argue that the health also means the emotional and psychological health, and that can be a huge, huge umbrella of all different things.
Yeah, ambiguous language. Well, David, the president wants lawmakers to pass legislation to prohibit late-term abortion. What are the chances of a bill passing in this divided Congress?
Well, this is really hard. Zero. That's the answer. Zero, because the House is controlled by Democrats and Nancy Pelosi. And the Senate, despite being controlled by Republicans, it's 53 votes that they have there. And two of those, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, that'll take it down to 51 because they're not getting those pro-choice Republicans. And so you're left with 51 votes, and in the Senate you need 60. So it's not going anywhere. It was strong rhetoric, but it's not going to solve the legislative issue in Congress.
David, we're a little bit tight on time, but I just want to get your quick reaction to those cut shots that we saw. Stark contrast between Democrats and Republicans when the president was talking about abortion. Quick reaction here.
Yeah, I mean, sitting on your hands on that is going to say quite a bit to the American people. And real quick, Nancy Pelosi out today reacting to the late-term abortion comments by President Trump. She said, it's just such a sad thing. That's the quote, a sad thing to see. I'm not quite sure how that's going to play with the American people.
Yeah, Senator Kamala Harris doubling down as well. All right, David, thank you.
Thanks, Jenna.
Well, tomorrow morning, lawmakers from both sides of the aisle will join together to turn to God, marking the 2019 National Prayer Breakfast. Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson sat down with this year's co-chairs to discuss the importance of putting aside their party differences to join together and pray.
With the deep partisan divide in our country, Senate Democrat Chris Coons and Republican James Langford are heading up this year's prayer breakfast. They say it's more important than ever to come together to pray.
A moment that's been set aside for decades to pause, to pray, to reflect, and to be able to challenge each other. And as in most events, it's not just the event itself, it's all the dialogue around it that really makes a lasting impact.
The event draws thousands from all 50 states and more than 100 countries.
So when I talk to skeptics, and there are many, I had some conversations with folks in my caucus about this yesterday. I say, just give it a try. Come and listen.
And while the breakfast falls during a tense political time, the senators say they don't plan to focus on any single issue.
I don't think we'll have any specific prayers about border security, border walls, border. Look, at the end of the day, partly why the National Prayer Breakfast has been an important and enduring institution here in Washington is that despite the changes from Republican to Democrat presidents' control of Washington, the issue of the day, it draws us towards the eternal, towards those things that uplift and inspire all of us.
Throughout the year, the senators lead a weekly prayer breakfast with about 24 members.
When we stop and pray for each other and share our spiritual stories with each other of our own journey of faith, It is very moving, and quite frankly, it's encouraging. And it's one of those foundational things that's within our democracy that I think people lose track of.
I think the hour that we spend every week in prayer together is one of the most important moments of a week here in the Senate.
President Trump has also publicly praised Senator Coons and mentioned how they pray together.
Senator Chris Coons, who on occasion we disagree, but I actually like him. We pray together, right? That's a good step.
Coons described to CBN News a moment when the two were in Delaware to greet the family of a fallen American serviceman.
That I could tell was a very challenging and powerful moment for him. The first time you are present with a family that has just lost their husband, their son, their father, is very difficult and very powerful.
He prayed with the president that day and encourages others to do so, even if they disagree politically.
And so I'm glad that he remembers that I'm someone who prays for him. We have very strong policy differences, but that doesn't mean I can't see him as someone deserving of and needing prayer.
Both senators are pleased to see candidates already in the running for president talking about their faith, whatever it might be.
So I'm proud of all of our presidential candidates that speak openly about their faith, because that demonstrates to America, I have a faith, I can choose to live my faith. If you have a faith, you can choose to live yours because of the nature of the country that we're in.
I do think Democrats, I'm a Democrat, have not told the story of how their faith inspires their public service in their life as much as I would hope in recent years. I think for us to expect of candidates that they will conceal whatever their faith views or traditions are is a disservice, both to those of us who try and serve our public and to our traditions as a nation.
The senators hope that as national and world leaders gather in prayer, there will be unity in focusing on what the Lord leads them to do. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Well, concern for Christians in Syria. Coming up, the potential problems that loom with the withdrawal of U.S. troops. President Trump in the State of the Union last night highlighted victories against the Islamic State in the Middle East, doubling down on his call for American troops to return home from Syria.
When I took office, ISIS controlled more than 20,000 square miles in Iraq and Syria just 2 years ago. Today, we have liberated virtually all of the territory from the grip of these bloodthirsty monsters. Now, as we work with our allies to destroy the remnants of ISIS, it is time to give our brave warriors in Syria a warm welcome home.
Well, when President Trump first announced American troops would leave Syria, it sent shockwaves through the region. Turkish President Erdogan threatened to invade northeast Syria, home to a number of ethnic minorities, including thousands of Christians.
CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell recently traveled to the area to talk to those in the path of this potential storm.
The people of this region saw almost immediately the effect of President Trump's announcement.
The impact of the withdrawal of the U.S. forces is mainly because the Turks have started threatening us.
This is the Turkish-Syrian border. Behind me, you can see the Turkish flag flying. One proposal is that Turkey would control a 20-mile security zone all along the Turkish-Syrian border. For most of the people we talked to said that would lead to a disaster.
Most of our Christian people lives in this area, and if any military operation happened in this area, it will be real fear on our people.
Yet Erdogan insists on this security zone.
We expect the promise to establish a safe zone to be fulfilled within a few months to ensure our country is protected from terrorists on our borders. Otherwise, we will establish this buffer zone ourselves.
Those terrorists are actually U.S. allies who fought together to drive out ISIS. While Erdogan typically only mentions the Kurds, northeast Syria is also home to Christians, Arabs, Yazidis, and other minorities. This melting pot has now established a new democracy here.
And now he wants to control the entire region. So he uses the pursuit of ISIS as his pet project, as smokescreen, to get at the rest of us. And that's why he sees democracy as a danger.
Recently, Erdogan set his sights on this part of northeast Syria, east of the Euphrates, saying when it is cleared from militants, the millions of people will have a chance to return to their homes. He made similar statements last year before his army, which is part of NATO, overran the Syrian city of Afrin. Along with jihadist mercenaries, it displaced hundreds of thousands while searching for Christians and burning churches. Some see that invasion and this year's push for the security zone as part of Erdogan's vision to revive the Ottoman Empire.
And Chris Mitchell is back from Syria and joins us here in studio in D.C. Chris, great to have you. Great report.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jen and John. It's great to be here back in Washington.
Yeah, well, Chris, you know, today President Trump, he said as soon as next week, he could announce that the U.S. and partners reclaimed 100% of the territory ISIS claimed as part of its caliphate in Syria. Break down what this would mean if he does make this announcement.
Well, if he does make this announcement, it means the battle that had been going on ISIS in this region is basically over. In fact, when we were there just about 10 days ago, we heard that basically the war against ISIS was over. I know we're going to have reports from Chuck Holton, who is literally there on the front lines. He's bringing back even tweets and pictures today. I think what it means is it's going to a new phase. With the announcement by President Trump on December 19th, 2018, it really did recalibrate the whole situation there. We all knew that the battle against ISIS was going to go over, but now with the pullout of U.S. troops, there's really a geopolitical tug of war going over there. All of a sudden, Turkey wants that to come in there. When the threat of Turkey came against this new government, they began to align, or I shouldn't say align, but they actually began to negotiate with the Assad regime. And what that would do is not only bring in the Assad regime, but also bring in the influence of Iran. The Shiite militias right on the other side of the Tigris River ready to come in. So you have Turkey, Iran, the Assad regime, Russia, all vying for this land right now after the battle of ISIS is going to be over. And who wins this tug of war is going to determine, I think, the future of the Middle East.
Who are there on the ground, give us a sense. Is there a fear for the people there that ISIS can regroup and basically restart their campaign?
There is a fear, and they were telling us that there were actually ISIS sleeper cells in many of the places around there, that the caliphate may be destroyed. The ideology has not. Many of them have gone underground, people that are sympathetic to ISIS. But beyond that, the real threat that they feel right now is from Turkey. They feel there's a potential of another genocide. There has been threatening by Erdogan, and he has allied with another group called the Free Syrian Army, much of them like al-Qaeda-like groups. And what they do is they look back to what happened last year in a town called Afrin, which is in northwest Syria. Many people not know about it, but what happened is that the Turkish army overran that city, took it over, and they're displacing the population, and that's exactly what Erdogan said he will do in this region as well. So that's probably their #1 threat, even greater than ISIS right now.
Yeah. Chris, talk about what it's like to go to Syria, a war-torn country. It's not safe. What kind of security measures did you have to take, and just what was that like being there?
Well, it was fascinating, and we had a lot of people praying, so that made a lot of difference, and we did feel the protection of the Lord when we were there because of people praying. We were with people that knew where to go and where not to go. They were places that they said, you know, don't get out of the car. We don't know if it would be safe for you or secure. So the key for us is actually being a people who know with the region, the situation, and what you should or shouldn't do. But it was a fascinating place. We met some wonderful people. I mean, I had a picture of Syria that changed dramatically when I was there, sitting down with a pastor's wife who had to leave Afrin last year, whose cousin's child was killed because of the jihadists, sitting down with a man, an Arab commander, who works with the Kurds. And I also found out that there's really not just the Kurds. I mean, a lot of people have this idea that, oh, this is the Kurdish land. It's much more than that. It's Yazidis, it's Arabs, it's Christians, Syriac Christians. It's really a mix and a melting pot. And this new government that's being formed is just one of the unique things in the Middle East. I think it's one of the underreported stories in the Middle East. It's a wonderful story of this new representative form of government that protects religious freedom and makes women a priority.
Chris, we appreciate your intrepid reporting.
Thank
Middle
you.
East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell, thanks for joining us.
Great to be here.
Well, still ahead, on Faith Nation, we go behind the scenes at the State of the Union.
We want to thank you again for joining us for Faith Nation tonight.
Well, as we leave you, we want to highlight some hard and talented work from our dedicated team behind the scenes here at Faith Nation. These are photos taken last night by the hardworking photojournalists Patrick Robertson and Mario Gonzalez, who work every day to help cover the stories that are important to you. Enjoy your evening. We'll see you back here tomorrow.